In this episode of Everyday Audio, I'm going to have the age-old argument, analog versus digital, so you don't have to come to fisticuffs with your friends over it. Along the way, I'm going to make a recommendation for the most cost-effective way to get into collecting music. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Everyday Audio listeners, and thanks for all the comments on my last video, Why I Buy Music in a Physical Format. I also got some great reviews in person. It seems like a lot of people's favorite bit was the silence bit. And that gave me an idea. The two parts of our practical approach here to audio on Everyday Audio are both practice and the limitations, which often is going to be cost effectiveness. And so on the practice side, I'm going to add an exercise or something that's related to listening and pushing your listening with every video when I post once a week here. The challenge is to go outside, listen for 2 minutes, or at least 2 minutes, as long as you're enjoying it. If you're enjoying it, continue to listen. And this time, close your eyes. Getting rid of that visual sense can really help you to focus on the auditory. And pick out a sound. It could be a bird, it could be a car, it could be a construction jackhammer. Anything. Pick out that sound and try to figure out exactly what direction it's coming from, and also how far it is, what it is, if it's moving, where it's moving to, and maybe even try to pick out several sounds. So, hope you guys enjoy that exercise there. The second part of our practical approach to everyday audio is cost effectiveness. And so when I'm talking here about analog versus digital or any topic, I am taking the point of view of somebody who loves audio but is on a budget. I watch a lot of YouTube videos by self-proclaimed audiophiles, which sounds a lot to me, is becoming more and more, and I'm going to talk about the word audiophile in my next video, so I'm not going to get too into it. My next video I'll talk about my system and how I put it together. 2 tape decks, a 6 CD changer and player, a receiver, and then I use 2 sets of 2 speakers, so 4 speakers total, all for less than $500, cables included. And I just mentioned that now because these audiophile channels, I have heard people say that a set of speakers for $8,000 or a receiver for $8,000 is on the lower end of cost. So in this channel, we are always focusing on what, by my perspective, is a more realistic point of view for collectors or listeners, for most collectors or listeners who are not going to have an unlimited amount of money to spend. I can't spend $8,000 on an amp, and I'm guessing not too many people can. For this argument, I want to introduce to you guys 2 of my friends, Analog Todd and Digital Todd. Yo, yo. Hey, I'm Analog Todd. So why don't you guys start us off by giving us a short summary of why you prefer the format that you prefer. So I still remember the first time that I went to a friend's house, had him put on a vinyl record. I remember what record it was. It was Laurie Anderson's Big Science, and it just blew my mind. I knew then that I was going to get a turntable, and you could hear the warmth, you could hear everything. It just sounded like she was in the room, and it was very open air. There's nothing close to that in the digital world. It's just less real. Man, sound. This guy is whack. He just likes to spend all of his money. He likes to talk about his vinyl. I've got a lot of friends like this, and they're just obsessed with themselves, and they need another hobby because they are wasting their money with this. Got a streaming service. I've got a few CDs that I play in my car. It makes it super easy, and I think it sounds even better. I don't have to deal with all the clicking and scratching and, keeping it in that kind of condition. CDs are just clean. There's just this crispness that really sounds great. So, with the sound, you're both right to an extent. I always say that analog and digital sound different. Not one is better or one is worse. On the analog side, yes, you have a lot of people describing it as open air. You're going to hear the biggest difference in the low end. So, analog sound reproductions are going to be more warm, and you get this warmth in a bass, especially it's most evident, I'd say, in an acoustic jazz bass. You can just hear that bass like it's in the room, and the air around it. You can also hear the room more. It's a more open air feel to the thing when you're listening in analog. That being said, you are also going to deal, the other side of that, with distortion in analog. And typically in a system, it's going to be mostly in the high end, in the high frequencies. So cymbals will start to sound a little crushed or smattered together, and there won't be that clarity in the high end, especially if you're not going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on your turntable, on your cartridge, etc. And the distortion, I think a lot of people like that sound, so it is a different sound. It's not necessarily bad. On the digital side, things are going to be clearer. Is that it's in a box, or it's not, you're in a room, you're hearing it in a room. Often digital, when I'm listening in headphones, I really like listening to digital music for that reason, because you're already in that environment. But it's going to sound more closed in, and you're not going to get that open air feeling of analog. A lot of people will describe it as cold or steely, and that is kind of getting at that clarity there. I'd say that the digital systems are going to shine a lot for the high end or the high frequencies. So again, listen to cymbals or those higher frequencies. They're going to have a clarity and a crispness in digital that is very hard or very expensive to get in analog. So different. Not better. We don't need to go to the Thunderdome. Okay, how about this one? The accuracy. Right? We know that vinyl is the actual groove, is the actual sound. Digital is processing all that through ones and twos. We're losing all that high-end information, and that's
Welcome to
why
the future,
it
man.
sounds
Ones and zeros.
so
It's a digital
distant,
world.
cold, and it sounds
Right,
great.
and the analog
Like,
sounding
it's-
warmth.
It's
all
not
the real
suffering. It sounds sound
Even better in my
information.
opinion.
It's the vibrations. It's
Welcome
the
to the
waves.
future.
They're in there.
Yeah,
that's
there's
analog.
computers.
That's sound.
know.
The accuracy problem. So for that, we're going to get a little nerdy and go to the whiteboard real quick.
So I'm going to start by drawing our sound curve here, which the analog fans are going to say is the truest representation. And often digital is thought of as approximating it in these boxes, similar to when you learn calculus, and we're approximating the area beneath a curve. Digital is doing that. Now, how many boxes, meaning how fine-tuned, and the more boxes you do, the closer together, the closer you're going to get to that curve. And how we measure that is called sample rates. Now, I have several options for these in my DAW mixer when I'm finishing and exporting a song. MP3s are at a 16 kilohertz. It varies, but mostly at a 16 kilohertz sample rate. It moves up to CDs are at a 44.1 kilohertz sample rate. And then finally, some higher end will go even higher than this, but I'm going to keep it at 96 kilohertz, which is what Tidal and a lot of higher end streaming services or high end reproductions are saying. Now, the science and studies done with engineers, with audio engineers, mastering engineers, says that people can tell a difference and say that 16 kilohertz sounds worse than 44 kilohertz. Now, where it gets dicey is that studies done and many mastering engineers and mixing engineers have said that They might be able to hear a difference between 44 kilohertz and 96 kilohertz, but when they do studies, 50% say the 44 kilohertz version was better, or 50, and then 50% say the 96 kilohertz version is better. So you might be able to hear a difference here, but is one better or worse? I know for a fact that many mastering engineers at the top of the industry now are still mastering in 44.1 kilohertz, and they don't buy that you can hear a difference here. And what we're talking about here are the transients, which is generally the very high or very low end of the spectrum, which are often subsonic, meaning that human ears cannot hear the very high or the very low.
Okay, so let's say that you still don't agree with me that you can hear the difference and that the vinyl is more accurate than the digital and a more accurate reproduction, and you can hear the high-end transients in there. The other thing that you are definitely going to deal with and can't argue with is the distortion that's occurring as you get closer to the end of a side of a record. So here you have the needle traveling at the same speed around this groove as it is when it finally gets to this groove. So as you come closer and closer to the end of the side of an analog record, you are getting increased distortion as you go to it. And that's why back before digital, when everybody was recording in analog, most bands would put their quieter songs towards the end of a side so that that distortion wouldn't be as pronounced, and their louder songs would be on the outer rim of the record. So either way, when you're dealing with vinyl, you're going to be dealing with distortion, and to pretend like you're not is just not realistic. You're never going to convince me that bringing this over to a friend's house or taking this out and showing this to him is going to be a lot better than handing him a CD or a digital streaming service. You know what aesthetics means to me? Sounds like you want to spend money, take up space, and make it super inconvenient for yourself. All I need to do is look at my phone, flick through it, bam, I'm listening to something, and the whole playlist just goes. Okay? I could also put my CDs in a changer and keep playing it. I don't have to take them out every single time I want to play. I mean, the vinyl thing, okay, it is just a pain in the rear end, just like this guy. The aesthetics matter. All right? What you put around you in life causes you enjoyment or pain, and so you need to pick what you put around you, because that's going to add to the beauty of your everyday life, enriching your life.
This distortion's hurting my ears right now.
Here is the clear aesthetic choice. Aesthetics, it's a tough one, guys. It's hard to beat analog for aesthetics for really all the reasons that I mentioned about why I buy music in a physical format in my previous video. There's much more intention put behind it. You have the larger format here with more visual, and it really becomes a part of your room. Whereas CDs are not going to do that as much, and streaming is definitely not going to do that. However, on Digital Todd's side, I'm going to say that in terms of cost effectiveness, which is a concern here on Everyday Audio, CDs right now hold a huge advantage. You can get new or used CDs in record stores for around $10, where I'm seeing new vinyl around $25 and used vinyl starting at around $15. I also have talked to my local record store owners. They are selling CDs, and they are believers in CDs. And a major reason why CDs hold an advantage right now is that the place in history. We've kind of come around to a point where CDs have become obsolete, and you can go to yard sales, and I've had this experience multiple times, and people really are just giving them away, or they are very, very cheap. I've got, great CDs in great condition, 30 CDs. The guy wanted to give them to me for $2, and I gave him 5 instead because I just felt too bad taking them for that. So the CDs you can find really cheap. Also the players. I go to my local restore. People are selling those, or at yard sales, you can find decent CD players. I found one for $20 or less. You will not find a turntable for that amount that's workable anywhere. So I am going to make the recommendation here, which might upset a lot of people, and I wouldn't have made this recommendation 10 years ago. But if you are somebody who is looking to get into collecting music and you are on a budget is a large concern for you, right now I'm going to recommend starting with CDs. The player will be cheaper, and definitely all of this product will be cheaper, and in general you're going to deal with less of the scratches and distortion and poor condition that you're going to find your used vinyl in. I will say that one thing you might want to take into account is how the music was recorded. Most music before 1985 is recorded in analog, so you're going to want to listen. So one approach is to listen to an analog reproduction to get the most realistic reproduction or accurate reproduction of what the artists were intending and the equipment that it was made on. After 1985, most recordings are going to be made in digital. It's cheaper that way for the artists and for the record companies, and it's been the increasing trend. Things like hip-hop, EDM are almost exclusively recorded in digital, and they're all affected in digital, and they're going to sound way better in digital for that reason, because, and a lot of pop these days as well, because it is so digitally affected, and it is really made and meant to be listened to in that format because of the dominance of streaming now. So hope you guys enjoyed. Please tell me some of your favorite analog or digital recordings. Do you prefer analog or digital, or do you see them just as different? Please do comment, like, and subscribe for more everyday audio.